Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com, and I'm joined tonight, it's a special reunion in ways, by Brother Franklin Rings from Mount Vernon Lodge number 3 in Albany, New York. Welcome to the pod, Brother Franklin.
Hey, thank you for having me, Brother Arce. It's been a long time coming, so I'm honored to be here.
We can see each other through our computer screens, but for our listener, there's a unique connection here. Franklin, full disclaimer, he is the last brother that I obligated as an entered apprentice, and we're both members of the same Mother Lodge or Home Lodge, Mount Vernon number 3 in Albany. And you are the first to be a part of our series where we talk about the reflections on your years in the craft, and for you it's really just 1 year, so this should be a great episode. These memories should be ripe and fresh in your head. Let's start with this you can't miss question. Do you still remember the night of your first degree?
Oh, a great question. I mean, honestly, most of it is definitely a blur. One of the things I do remember, and I'm curious to see if you remember as well, is I felt like I wasn't very nervous, but man, do I remember sweating like crazy, let me tell you. Whew.
You also kind of came through with what we would affectionately refer to as like the COVID degrees, which were a little bit different.
Yep.
And I think you guys had a significant difference because there was just a different energy, I would say, that was in the lodge room, because during that time in New York State, we were emerging from the first phase of the lockdown due to the public health emergency. And this was a no-touch degree at all. Not like much physical contact happens during the degree, but you didn't benefit from getting to go into the preparation room and getting prepared. Talk a little bit about that experience. You came to Lodge wearing a dark suit and tie, fully expecting what?
I was expecting the unexpected, that's for sure. Like I didn't look into much. I didn't look up or spoil anything for myself, so I was really curious to see what the full shtick was going to be. But yeah, it was pretty interesting knowing retroactively that I got a different experience, or maybe a slightly different experience, was very, very nice to look back on, if I'm being honest, because I think there's going to be a group of Masons that will come out and we'll all have this one similar experience that many others have not. So that's really good. But the night was really, really awesome, honestly. Like getting to see the building for the first time. Our temple is really, really beautiful.
I remember as the acting master for that night coming downstairs, and normally the little talk that I give to the brothers in the preparation room, we did outside of Lodge. As we mentioned, we had a exemplar in the dressed as an entered apprentice that went through the degrees. And what I think made it unique for you, which this was also a first for me, is your group basically shadowed behind the exemplar up to the part of approaching the altar for the obligation. So this was new for me because as someone that's usually conferring the degree, the person that's going through the ritual has not had the benefit of rehearsal and doesn't know the parts.
Right.
But I had a brother in front of me that knew, so I knew if he made a wrong turn or something where we were going. And so the degree was, for lack of a better term, almost a perfect degree because you saw things were much more simplified. And I don't think that took away from the experience at all, because I would say maybe the ambiance, what you expected when you came into the room, the sounds, the smells, that was still the same experience you would have gotten when you went through your second degree. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And in a lot of ways, for me personally, I feel like it was a better experience to capture things, which is interesting looking back because I feel like it's still all a blur. But being able to watch somebody throughout the process as opposed to experiencing myself gave me a little bit of perspective on like, oh, what would I do if I was in this situation right now? And being able to see how the two people are interacting as opposed to needing to be one of the people interacting definitely made things interesting for sure. And then it gave me a little bit of an idea of what to expect going into the second. So
to me, that's what made the degree special. You being able to observe it, because for so many of us that went through it, naturally, it was a mystery up to that point. And you can imagine, when you're greeted at the door on the point of a sharp instrument, or you're led around a room with a blindfold on and you're hearing sounds and you're wondering, where are they taking me? Like, this room seems so much bigger with the path that they're taking. That experience you definitely got for sure in the second degree and in the third degree.
I think it was a unique perspective, and I'm honestly looking forward to hearing what more people from this generation think as well. I wonder if there's going to be a recollection similarity between us and other Masons from years prior or years into the future.
Yeah, you are part of like a special class and a special moment of history. That's definitely true. And I think the other thing that's a shared experience is, no matter how much, whether you're Masonic mentor at the time or how much reading you do on your own to kind of research, you never can really fully be prepared for it, because the closest thing I could explain the first degree and the rest of our degrees on would kind of be like maybe a college initiation experience, where you're wondering, there's so many questions in your mind as to why, but what's different is in college, you don't go through the ritual that explains it. In Masonry, you do.
I don't think I can think of any similarities that I've experienced like initiation, that's for sure. I wasn't part of a college fraternity or anything like that. So really getting into Freemasonry was my first fraternity experience. And honestly, I'm glad that was the case.
So what's the one big takeaway that you have from your first degree night?
Well, expect the unexpected for sure. not to throw anything out there for the listeners, but no, what did I take away? Well, one of the things that I didn't necessarily expect in a bad way, but was really surprised and happy to see, was how welcoming and happy everybody was. Like everybody was very clearly happy to see that I was there.
Right.
And that was immediate and very noticeable.
Yeah. I think the other thing for me, looking back on especially the first degree, was, okay, why do I have to be clothed a certain way? Why am I being led around a room a certain way? Why am I wearing a blindfold? What's the deal with this rope? What's all these other questions that are being asked to me? Why are they speaking in Old English? Who just poked me in the tit with something sharp? And why did they do that?
Right.
These were all swirling. And then the second part of the degree, where you start actually getting the ritual lessons, the lectures, as we like to call it, I was sitting here going, is this guy saying this all from memory, or is he just speaking? And man, he is waxing deep. Like, I'm getting some like biblical, historical, beginning of the earth knowledge here. Like, what am I supposed to do with all of this?
The lecture was definitely, probably looking back retrospectively, my favorite part. And it definitely made me think, am I going to be able to get more of these in further degrees? Like, that was kind of one of the most shocking things. Like, wow, A, this guy did this all from memory, but B, this is probably deeper than at least I'm hoping it is, right?
Right. You're like, can I get a takeout or take something takeaway so I can look this up when I get home? Because there's no way I'm going to remember all this.
Yeah, for sure. So being able to think about that.
How much space was between the first degree and your second degree?
Let's see. So the first degree was April and the second was in October. So I had the summer. It was about 6 months.
You were raised as a Master Mason in...
That was in February of this year. Yep.
I always feel bad because we tend to overlook the second degree, because it's like, oh, the third degree, and everything that happens in that third degree is pretty magical. But when you look back at that night, you're like, okay, I went through one degree, and the second degree was a lot like the first degree, except there's a longer talk towards the end, which gets deeper into the history of the world, kind of. Third degree comes. It's the Hiramic legend. What was your takeaway when you saw that in front of you?
Oh, geez, the Hiramic legend. That was a night that I feel like if I could have, oh my gosh, I wish I could have taken takeout, like you had mentioned. There was so much to think about and so much to contemplate and try to understand that I feel like I spent the majority of the night just trying to take mental notes, especially after the second degree.
I think what makes it so unique is that whether you get prepared or you do a little looking into it and you're like, okay, this is almost like a play that's being performed. your first time seeing it, you're like, oh, well, that's the story of Freemasonry. I think a lot of guys walk away thinking, oh, okay, they just explained everything. There's this Hiram dude, and there's the King Solomon Temple. Yeah, some of these things did they ever mention this guy? And yeah, for one or two references, but it went right over your head because it was buried in a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And then when you realize, like, hey, Hiram Abiff, not a real guy. The whole Hiramic legend is really just an allegory, and you're really supposed to be Hiram Abiff, building your own spiritual temple and improving yourself. And you're like, huh. Big takeaway there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned building the spiritual temple, because that's probably like the biggest takeaway I got out of the 3 degrees as a whole was, continuing to work on your rough ashlar. That's an amazing lesson to take out from that. No doubt.
If you're listening and you're like, what are they talking about? The rough ashlar is a lesson that you get early in the 1st degree, where you take basically an unfinished rough rock that gets pulled right from the quarry. And the thought is that through time and work, you're able to smooth that rough ashlar into a perfect ashlar to be better laid and fit in the foundation of King Solomon's temple. I want to get to your interest in joining Freemasonry, because typically, as we're into the summer now, this is when lodges begin to receive communications from men who are interested in joining the craft. I don't know why guys over the summer, maybe they spend too much time with their family. I don't know what it is.
Got to get an escape somehow. Right?
I want to join Freemasonry. So what was your reason for wanting to join a Masonic lodge, if you knew what that was, or much less, like, why did you want to become a Mason?
I wish I could say there was one proper reason, but there were definitely multiple. I was in a time in my life where I definitely didn't have a ton of people that I was necessarily associating with. And I also had and still have a really big love for history. So I was definitely interested specifically in the fraternal aspect. I wanted to be able to interact with men of higher moral value than that of which I had been socializing with in the past. And I've definitely had heard about that through Freemasonry. And then additionally, the historical aspect, knowing people like, Brother George Washington was a part of this fraternity, and some other folks that I had read about. And then thinking about the historical depth of it, I was like, man, if I can get me a piece of this and see what it's like, I'd be curious. And then additionally, I was beginning to get interested into the occult and esoteric stuff. And I had heard, through all the conspiracy theorists and random things you would read on the internet and the Da Vinci Code, of course, that maybe there'd be some teaching in that as well. So quite a few reasons. So
while we may share the same hairstyle, there's quite a few years that separate between you and I.
Or lack thereof, right?
Yeah. And it's always amazing for me to hear younger brothers in the craft come in saying, hey, I was looking to make a change in my life, for lack of a better term, kind of upgrade the circle of friends that I had. I wanted to be with a higher caliber of group of guys that talked about bigger thoughts, things that my bros, I might be the only one in my pack that actually talks about this with my friends. And so it never really gets spoke of. But then the idea of trying to find kind of a mentor role in life, it's refreshing to hear younger guys say, hey, I was seeking this knowledge from somebody. I was looking for someone to impart wisdom, and that you found it in a Masonic lodge. So you have a bunch of different brothers and you're all interacting with these guys. When you first got a chance to visit a lodge, do you remember what that experience was like?
Gosh, yeah.
Because if I recall, we had a tough time trying to even get you in because the building was closed, and it was like 1 week you could come, the next week you couldn't. So we were kind of meeting at doing dinners and kind of social events while restaurants were still open.
The social events were good too. I honestly really enjoyed those. I don't know if I had visited a lodge regularly before my initiation, honestly, when I think about it. But I know we did shortly thereafter visit Masters number 5 for your presentation, The Point Within a Circle. So I think that might have been the first time I had really been to a Masonic lodge outside of my initiation.
Interesting. You didn't get to become visit lodges until you were a traveling man, which is
Pretty cool experience, honestly.
so the moment when you decided like, hey, I'm going to do this, like how much research did you do into Freemasonry and what were your sources at that time?
Well, there is of course the Oracle named Google. I keep him in my back pocket very well, usually the front pocket actually. But yeah, I did not do a ton of research. I had an understanding that some of these things could be looked up and there was a capacity to have some knowledge, but I didn't want to spoil anything for myself. So I kind of did some base reading on what Freemasonry was in the public eye. At the time, there was, I believe you had recommended actually a Netflix series. I think it might have been Inside Freemasonry.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't think that's on Netflix anymore, unfortunately, but I gave that a watch through, and that was really like a big propelling unit forward because I think they explain a lot of things and kind of uncover some questions.
So basically you entered into this completely just trusting instinct.
Yeah, I would say so.
Wow.
I definitely didn't get any bad vibes from you or any of the other brothers I had met with. And I definitely think a lot of the hodgepodge on the internet was precisely that. So I was really interested in getting the whole experience first and foremost from myself, as opposed to somebody else telling me something online. So,
and now looking back through your year in the craft here, was there a question that you had in the beginning that was answered now 1 year in?
An even better question. Well, I think I was curious on how far Freemasonry was going to go for me in terms of how long I could expect to be interacting in the craft. So, better way to, I think I could explain this would be like, how would I be doing my first 3 degrees and then moving on from there? Maybe I wouldn't be interacting with people in the craft as much. Like I got the whole experience and that was that. So that was always on the table.
Kind of like a college. You thought it would be like college, like degrees, and then you graduate and you go out into the world.
In some capacity, yeah. And I was curious to like what level of socialization was going to continue to occur within the lodge and stuff like that. So after like, I want to say probably about midway through practicing for my 2nd degree, like in terms of time length and stuff, I was like, man, I'm going to be interacting with these people for a long time. So that question definitely got answered pretty quickly. But after the 3rd, yeah, I knew I was in it for sure. So I can't see a future without it.
I think a lot of guys come into the craft and these might be common questions is what is my purpose here? How can I become a better person?
Yeah.
How can I find what the universe or God or my creator or whatever supreme being that you, whatever tradition you follow, what are their plans for me? Like, give me some signs. And I'll be kind of honest, those answers didn't really come to me until a few years after being raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason, only because of the work that I was doing, studying the ritual to perform the degrees myself as part of a team for other brothers.
Very cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot that can come from going through those 3 degrees, and a lot of answers I think can be answered just by going through the process. So in a lot of ways, those big questions I think can be spoken to you through the degree process is the best way I would think. And you can receive those answers. But man, is there a lot of study also just, going with those lectures and going with the ritual itself? Like you got to put in your work if you're looking to find some of those answers as well.
Brother Rings, or Franklin, like many men interested in joining Freemasonry, at least in New York State, started his journey by filling out an information form through our Grand Lodge website. You could just search for New York Freemasonry, Grand Lodge of New York, and boom, it's going to pop up right there. We had kind of discussed we're not a member of a college fraternity. I know you're a member of some other social groups. Also, you got your sports and your activities that you're a part of. What was your experience like as far as being different from, quote unquote, joining any other group that you may be a part of?
The first thing I had noticed was everybody was very welcoming. There was no bad ego, no bad influence or anything that I could detect or even now see. And I think a lot of groups, when you enter, there's that aspect of being the outsider that's being integrated in, and you can feel that alienation in some capacity. At least I definitely feel like I've been able to. And I didn't feel that with Freemasonry. That's for sure. So the initiation and introduction process was very, very seamless. Everybody was very welcoming. That was definitely one of the biggest takeaways that made things different. And I think the interaction outside of those groups is also a huge difference as well. Like I talk to my brothers all the time, and that can't be said the same with other social groups I'm a part of. So
That's also true. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that one is a top 5 answer for me. The other thing that made it different for me to join a Masonic Lodge was I've never joined an organization where they do more than just a background check, where they actually come and visit with you at your home and have a conversation with you and your family. Like,
true.
To me, I was like, this is interesting. This is more like kind of joining a church group but it wasn't. It was just to meet the family, answer any questions, just really have that opportunity to let everybody who's important in your life know, or in my life at the time, like why I was doing this and what this was about to mean, and how it would also impact their life with the time that I would be spending at the lodge.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's I don't even know why I had not thought about that. I think the majority of me getting to know everybody at the lodge was definitely those social dinners we had. So yeah, I could see that being very, very intimate in that regard. And I think it's pretty important because the craft ends up becoming such a big part of all these brothers' lives that you definitely want to get to meet these families and meet these friends that have been in these brothers' lives for so long.
Right.
It's a good call.
The other thing that's kind of different about this experience, just because I know you, you got to purchase something that you wear twice a month on the first and third Mondays of the month that you probably don't wear any other days of the month or evenings or going out, I'm guessing. Just guessing.
Yeah, it took me a second, but yeah, no, yep. And that's actually the only suit I wear. That's the only suit I own to this day. So I'm looking to expand my regalia, of course. But
there we go.
Yeah, that was
I remember you being so excited. You're like, okay, so dark suit and tie. So can I get a dark navy?
Yeah. I thought blue looked pretty snazzy. And I mean, I figured, if I'm going to make a grand entrance into Freemasonry, I might as well be in a nice colored suit, right? So
I told you I did the same thing. The first year that I was going to meetings, I would wear kind of a mixed match. I had a sports coat and like dark dress pants that I would just kind of hodgepodge it together. And then once I got raised, I'm like, okay, this is going to be kind of serious for me. So I took my portion of my tax return money that year and went on over to the Men's Warehouse and bought 2 suits right off the rack. First time I ever had a tailored suit, and picked it up like 2 weeks later. And I'm like, I can't wait to wear these to lodge. Like, I feel all special. And it makes me smile every time I see your friends comment on your pictures on social media, like, whoa, Franklin.
Yeah. Well, Freemasonry had a part of that. What can I say? Right. It's pretty cool that you mentioned that, though, because I'm actually feeling the same exact way. Like after the third, and honestly, at the dismissal of this year, I was like, man, I really like this blue suit, but I should probably honestly begin to integrate more and get a black suit as well. So that's already something I'm looking forward to using and purchasing in the next Masonic year.
Look at you. You're going to have a full wardrobe here pretty soon.
I hope so.
I think another thing that makes Freemasonry different than other organizations that men could be joining, one is that you have to fill out a petition to show your interest in joining, where some guys will say, oh, it's like an application. Kind of, but not. Discussion for another time. Another big difference is that I would say that Freemasonry is not an instant gratification society or organization, where as your first year in Freemasonry, Franklin, what did you spend a lot of time doing?
Reading.
But specifically,
lots of reading.
What kind of studying or reading were you focused on?
Well, I mean, probably speaks for itself, but ritual, lots of ritual. Any chance that I got an opportunity to either practice the ritual that I was given or think about and look forward to what could possibly be coming next, that was definitely part of it. But yeah, I would say reading the ritual. Second thing being definitely contemplating what could be coming next. I like to go down, I think you had mentioned the rabbit hole per se when it comes to the ritual. So whatever I would get my teeth into, I would go as far down as I could intellectually get down and then recycle it, see what comes back tomorrow. And then that would lead my inquisitive mind to thinking about what could be happening in the next degree. And so that was kind of setting myself up for success in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And for any interested gentleman who's thinking about pursuing his path in Freemasonry, what we're alluding to here, and other brothers that have done this before, they're like, oh, we know what they're talking about.
Of course.
Our ritual is steeped on tradition, and it is centuries old, and it is performed from memorization. And for the candidate who's going through the degrees, for him to advance from the second, or the first to the second, and then the second to the third, he has to become proficient in what we would call the catechism, which for men that follow the Catholic tradition, you might be familiar with the questions and answers and the back and forth. But what kind of makes it extremely challenging in Freemasonry, especially when you're a newer member, is one, a lot of our ritual, because the text is so old, the language that it's spoken in is not spoken in anymore. You don't walk down the streets of Schenectady or Troy or Albany and hear Old English spoken very often these days at all, if ever. And the second part is that you're basically told that you are not supposed to reveal any of the quote-unquote secrets of Freemasonry. So even if you wanted to find a study partner and coach them up on how to do the back and forth with you, you have this fear that, oh my God, would I be violating a Masonic obligation that I took if I shared this with an outsider?
Big time.
So
with the profane, yeah.
Really the only people that you can have these conversations with are your other Masonic brothers, which is kind of by design so that we can kind of guide you through all of this, because the unique thing about this cipher that we give you is that you could accidentally leave it out, and it's prepared that if the untrained eye picked it up, they would just put it down because they would get no knowledge or information from it. But you, as the wise and crafty Master Mason or brother, would be able to decipher it and go, oh, I know what these words mean. This is pretty unique and special. And I find that for a lot of guys, when it gets to it, we refer to that as doing the work. It's a bit of a turnoff, and it's kind of hard to prepare them sometimes that this is like a college degree in instances where you do have to study and learn it and know it. No, there's not a written test or, a thesis that you do at the very end, but you are expected to be able to understand it.
I don't have a ton of experience in higher education, and I think this was really good for stretching my mind in those ways for sure. Because let's see. So that was in 2021. I hadn't been in school in 5 years at this point. And I haven't done any super deep educational research or anything like that since then. So this was the first time in what feels like quite a while where I was really applying myself to some material and trying to get the best out of it. And honestly, it was very rewarding. So
scary part is, do you know how long it takes you to do the questions and answers for the first 2 degrees on your own in your head, like ballpark it?
For the first 2 combined or individually?
Well, sometimes I use it as a way to tell time. If I have 25 minutes to kill, I'll just start doing the EA.
Oh, that's pretty good, actually. I might take that into account, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Let's get to the important part here, because you come in I think you and I shared the same path. So far as I know, we had no male family member who had ever been a Mason. Yeah, okay. So we're an off the street guy. Yep.
Definitely.
And, we come in, we really don't know what to expect, but we know that kind of the high point of Masonry is, at least to our knowledge at that time, is being raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. And I always tell new brothers, interested gentlemen, that is one of the top 5 most memorable moments of my life. We don't want to give that away. I was telling you before we started recording, I find that to be one of the real true secrets in Freemasonry, is that experience. But when it comes to looking back on that particular moment, where does it rank for you in important moments? And what was the one lesson that came to mind while that was happening through that experience that you carry with you every day?
Wow, definitely really good questions. Well, let's see. The first thing that comes to mind. Could you repeat the question? Actually, I feel like those were good questions. I'm already lost in thought.
Well, So the first part is, when you think of the moment, either it's being raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason or
Right.
the completion of the third degree, because there are some real special parts that also happen in that story that follows afterwards. What was the one like, oh, I'll never forget that because that stuck in there. And then now looking back and going, hey, from February, taking that Master Mason's degree, this is the one thing that's really still in this head that's fresh right here.
Gotcha. Well, the first thing that comes to mind without a doubt about that night is seeing the brothers who I saw there, for sure. Like seeing the faces and knowing like, wow, these people took time out of their day to be here for this very important moment for me. That's easily ranked in like the top 3 moments of my life thus far. So that's pretty big. And then looking back even further, I mean, obviously still seeing the faces of my brothers on that night is very important, but I also can recollect feeling some sort of emotion around like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like a process was completed, something was finished, but intellectually and in some cases very shortly thereafter, I knew like this was only the beginning. So that feeling very quickly, like completely just disappeared.
It's interesting. I was going to say the same thing as when you are being raised and at that moment, at that night, and you see the faces of your lodge brothers and you're like, wow, like all eyes are literally on me at this moment. Like this is kind of a big deal, So it's definitely in my top 5. But I think the biggest takeaway, and it's changed over the years, having been a part of other third degrees, looking back at like the big lesson, I know this is going to sound really weird to some people, but I really don't fear death. It's not like I'm welcoming it. I'm not a daredevil. I'm probably the safest person But I understand that the concept of death is really just something that we use in human terms, because if you believe in the immortality of a soul and an everlasting life, basically the legacy or the lives of others that you touch by influencing them through your time here on Earth, you realize that you're never really gone. A part of you is always going to be here forever.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. And I'm going to piggyback, off of that as well. The immortality of the soul is definitely important and a big takeaway from that. But in order to leave behind that legacy, you always got to be working on your rough ashlar, right? So in a lot of ways, that feeling of I have completed something, but I'm going to be moving into a new beginning here. That's when I was like, okay, the real work on the ashlar begins now. I've got all the tools to do so. So it's time to move forward and leave behind that legacy for the immortality of the soul.
My heart smiles every time you say the ashlar, because basically you are the newest ashlar in the lodge at Mount Vernon. And I was very excited to hear this year that moving into your second degree, you've actually accepted a position in the officer line. So you're going to be part of the leadership group there. What chair are you going to be sitting in, and where do you see the future for Brother Rings at Mount Vernon?
So this year I'm going to be junior deacon, which I'm very, very excited about. But moving into the future, I mean, I'm definitely going to be continuing my traveling to the east for sure. There's probably an infinitesimal amount of steps that I'm not aware of to get to that point quite yet. But just going to continue to walk that path and definitely do some more Masonic reading for sure. Definitely check out the other authors that have been in the sphere for the past couple hundred years and see what they have to say about the fraternity.
All right. Well, we're going to have to set a date a year from now, and hopefully before then, just to see how things are going. We're going to keep tabs.
I'm down always.
Brother Franklin Rings, one of my favorite millennials.
Hey, right on the border with Z, so
Gotcha.
I think we're Zillennials.
Oh, you kids these days. Thanks for being a part of our podcast this week, brother.
Thanks for having me, Brother RC. It's an absolute pleasure.
If Masonic education is important to you, we have a whole bunch of that on our website at craftsmanonline.com. A reminder that new episodes of our podcast are available for download every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.